We turn now to Tony Schwartz, CEO of the Energy Project, who co-wrote The Art of the Deal with Donald Trump and went on to be a Trump critic and donate some of the proceeds. And we turn to you at a time like this. A gold Trump sneaker could be right out of a movie. I'm curious what you think of how he dealt with what was actually an exit from the MAGA bubble, people who weren't just showing up to greet and support him, but he still tried to lie about the opposition he ran into there.
Predictably, he invents reality in the terms he wants it to be seen, and he simply says what he does is he talks about issues that he won't ever acknowledge are far, far from reality. He's invented a complete fantasy world that he lives in 99% of the time, and even when he goes barely outside the MAGA world, he's still applying the same principles.
So almost like a method acting bubble.
Yeah, method acting.
Kind of.
Well, I mean, I think actually he really does now. When's the last time Trump said something that was true? Hard to find.
I'm thinking. It's a great, sometimes the questions come across the table. Well, I would say that he refers to he sometimes refers to public developments that are true. So he'll talk about something with immigration or something with the economy. I mean, politicians have their spin on it, but as opposed to everything when he talks about himself, his buildings, his finances, his campaign, it's lies. But when he talks about, there's an immigration issue, that's something that's true.
I mean, look, I think this ruling against him for what cumulatively looks like $500 million is a really interesting moment, because I think what doesn't get said often enough is that Trump's number one interest is not in power, it's in money. Now, money is power, but what he cares about most, and that selling sneakers is a good example of that, what he cares about most is being rich, and being specifically the richest man in the world. And if the richest man in the world right now is Putin, you can understand why Trump is so envious of him. We don't know that it's Putin, but we do know that Putin is immensely wealthy. So what I think happens with Trump is that he mistakes his worth, or he confuses and conflates his worth as a person with his net worth.
So it's funny you mentioned that, and we've been covering Putin, who's in the news for a lot of reasons. You look at him killing Navalny, and Trump is under some pressure on this. He loves to say, I'm doing whatever I want. No, this makes the Republican Party look really bad. I showed earlier in the show, Tucker Carlson trying to walk it back. But here's how Trump was pitching his Navalny angle with this sort of very offensive, ridiculous comparison last night. Take a look.
It's a horrible thing, but it's happening in our country, too. We are turning into a communist country in many ways. And if you look at it, I'm the leading candidate. I get indicted. I never heard of being indicted before. It is a form of Navalny. It is a form of communism or fascism.
Fact check, false. But I want to take that very seriously. He's saying that in the Fox crowd. It's fusing a weakness they have, which is how do you let Putin get away with so much, and a grievance they have, which is if anyone holds him accountable in any court of law anywhere in the country, he wants to say he's like the dissident. But this is dangerous, as you know, Tony, because other leaders have used this very card abroad to great effect. And they can convince large groups of people that they are actually the embattled underdog, or that the system is against them. Do you see this as something dangerous where this is the way he convinces people?
I see him as immensely dangerous because he will be so much freer to pursue his personal agenda if he's reelected. And there is no question about what that agenda is now, which is to be an authoritarian leader, to have complete control, as we learned this morning, to deport people and to create detention camps. And I really believe that, though I'm not a number 1 or number 10 enemy on his list, I'm somewhere in there. And I actually have made the decision, I've shared with my friends, that if Trump's reelected, I'm leaving. I'm leaving the United States. Why? Because I don't feel safe. And anybody who doesn't believe that they are less safe, and that includes the right, because authoritarian leaders don't always discriminate, Anybody who believes that is living a fantasy. Trump is going to do what he says he's going to do.
And you sat in the room with him. You guys sat together sometimes. It was just the two of you, right?
Dozens of times.
You believe in a second term he would use the government against writers, dissidents, political opposition, people like yourself as well?
There is absolutely no question he would. And somebody like you is also at risk, I would say. You know, anybody in the media who's talked about him in any way that he finds the slightest bit offensive, and he finds all of MSNBC offensive, is at risk. Yes. This is something that the people who love and support Donald Trump don't recognize, that they are as vulnerable as everyone else, because Trump, as we've talked about many, many times, has only one person he's interested in, himself.
Yeah.